Now let's talk about my favorite, and that's covers and how important a good cover is to a successful book. Now, I'm a very visual person, so I love awesome covers. And let's start with this one. So this has some pretty good artwork to it. To me, it says romance, adventure. You got the flags flying and the horses, and so there's some gallantry there. Maybe there's a fantasy component thrown in. Well, this book flopped. Now, wait a minute, aren't we talking about proving that a good cover is an important thing? And the answer is yes, we are. The problem with this one was that this book was about politics, intrigue, assassination, double crosses. It was really Machiavellian, and that cover didn't speak to its target market. And again, this book tanked. You want to know what book this was? That's right, it was Game of Thrones. Now, if there's ever a case study for how important a book cover is, this is it. Now, this story came to me straight from my cover artist, Stephen Yuill, who ended up doing a bunch of the Game of Thrones artwork. And this wasn't the first time Game of Thrones flopped. It had launched once before with this cover. Yep, you can guess why that happened. The publisher knew they had a good book, and after it tanked the first time, they came back to Stephen to develop new art. Except, in publishing, artists seldom get to have creative license on their covers. At this time, romance novels were hot, and the publisher thought that if Game of Thrones had a romance feel, it would sell more. And of course it didn't, because it had nothing to do with the story. So finally they came back to Stephen and said, you take a crack at it, you come up with your own cover design. He did, came up with this one, and Game of Thrones became a bestseller. Now let's take a look at these three covers. The one on the left, pretty good. It's got pretty evocative. It's got that backlit in the forest, the name Gone. Second one, maybe not quite as nice. And the third one, I'm not sure what this is all about. Well, what I did was I took these three covers. The one on the left is actually a real book, and actually all the covers are from real books, but I renamed them all the same. And I went out to some people for a survey, and I said, based on just the cover alone, which one of these books would you buy? Now, not surprisingly, the one on the far left won with almost 75% of the vote. So then I went out and said, okay, let's take the same book, and instead of just the cover, let's add a rating. But I put them in sort of reverse order. So the one on the left, which I think is the best cover, I gave 3.5 stars. The one in the middle, 4. And the one that I think is the worst, I gave 4.5. And check it out. Even with a 3.5 star rating, the good cover still won out against the bad cover that had a 4.5 star rating. And finally, I added in some reviews. So the one on the left, I gave 12. The one in the middle, sort of the medium cover, I gave 115. And the one on the right, I gave a 427. Even with all that, people still gravitated towards the good cover. So this shows you how important having a good cover is. I can't emphasize this enough. Now I have to say, Stephen is a great artist, but he's also pretty expensive. I spend a lot of money on my cover, but I wouldn't do that if I didn't believe it was one of the most important aspects to selling your book.